Once they get to Yumbi camp, refugees from South Sudan can start to breathe normally again. They fled their country, forced in their haste to leave everything behind. As soon as they cross the border, the fear of falling into the clutches of armed men is at last over.
On the road to Uganda, we saw people getting slaughtered or held up. Anyone on a motorbike or in a car was robbed or killed by gangs.
All those who fled talk of the violence, rapes and abductions witnessed or experienced in their villages or on the way to Uganda.
My mother was taken and stabbed to death on the way to the farm. My father, he was shot in Juba. You don't hear the sound of gunfire here.
The civil war in South Sudan opposing government and opposition forces began more than 3 years ago. In the summer of 2016, 1 year after the signing of a peace agreement, fighting flared up yet again, forcing hundreds of thousands of people to flee. Around 250,000 refugees have been provided with shelter in Yumbe.
All the organizations here are having to cope with this huge influx of refugees. We began by taking responsibility for water supply in latrines, providing essential health services and setting up mobile clinics that have since become fixed health clinics. Right now, we're setting up a health surveillance system for the entire camp to be ready for potential epidemics.
To prevent the outbreak of disease, MSF is working on improving water quality. Access to water and sanitation is still the biggest issue in the camp, which, 6 months after people started arriving, is taking on an air of permanence.
A country without civilians is not a country. We need a country whereby civilians are being protected, are being valued.
Uganda has mobilised its efforts to host the refugees decently, providing them with small plots of land and what's needed to put up a shelter and cook food. The huge influx of people in the space of just a few months, however, rapidly exceeded the country's capacity to respond. But as the situation in the camps becomes more stable, although unable to return home, the refugees have the possibility at least of being able to live in security. Paris at the beginning of January. It's raining and temperatures vary between 0 and 10 degrees. This 24-year-old man is from Pakistan, not far from the border with Afghanistan. He arrived in Paris 2 days ago.
I slept under the bridge there, where all people and some people sleep, and one night without blanket, something like that, and without food also. And it's raining, it's cold, it's not bearable.
At the end of December, MSF set up a drop-in centre where migrants can share their experiences, get help with coping with the cold temperatures and access medical care. Of the 70 to 80 people arriving in Paris every day, only 50 or so are given a place in the humanitarian centre set up by the authorities in the north of the city. Hundreds of people are sleeping rough, despite the authorities wanting to move them on and prevent them from settling in public spaces.
The police came this morning and took away all our belongings, including blankets and mattresses. They loaded them onto a truck and forced us to leave. The police are aggressive and sometimes they hit people, especially on the knees. They use tear gas too.
There are around 100 migrants and asylum seekers from East Africa sleeping in this street in the north of Paris. After each police operation, they come back. They really have no other choice. The people of Mosul have endured 2 years of living in an area controlled by so-called Islamic State. In October 2016, with the support of an international coalition, the Iraqi army, Kurdish fighters and Shia militias launched an offensive to retake the town. Many inhabitants have fled the bombing and fighting. Reem and her family have found refuge in Hazia camp.
She told me that she was living 2 years in Mosul. Her husband was a policeman. They were threatened almost every day. They were living in fear because they were afraid of policemen. They were being executed at the time. She suffers from headaches, breathing difficulties, poor appetite, insomnia, anxiety, fear. She has symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, in which they have flashbacks of traumatic events that she witnessed or that she had.
Reem's not the only one with such a story to tell. Given the scale of distress generated by the violence, an MSF team provides psychiatric and psychological support in displaced persons camps to help people find the strength to confront the yet more challenges that lie ahead. Imagine this MSF hospital near a conflict zone. There's sufficient space, staff and technical infrastructure to provide treatment in satisfactory conditions to up to 10 emergency cases at the same time. Any more than 10 casualties requires activating the mass casualty plan, which the teams rehearse to ensure everyone is aware of the procedure to be followed. Then one day it happens for real. Several bombs have just gone off in a market a few kilometres away. The hospital is alerted. 50 casualties will arrive in about 15 minutes. The doctors inform the hospital director the mass casualty plan needs to be activated, and a siren is immediately sounded to warn the entire hospital. The first priority is to clear the hospital of any patients well enough to leave. As many beds as possible have to be made available. Then staff get prepared. The casualties will be dispatched to 4 zones: green, yellow, red or black, depending on their condition. In each zone, beds and medical supplies must be prepared and sufficient staff mobilised. As soon as the plan is activated, staff interrupt their routine work and proceed to their assigned posts. For example, the person in charge of hygiene in the paediatric ward goes to the red zone to disinfect beds that have been freed up. As for the 2 emergency room doctors, one goes to the red zone, the other to the yellow zone. All entrances to the hospital are closed, except one, which serves as a first filter. No more than 1 accompanying person per patient. To enable the teams to work as efficiently as possible, anyone else accompanying a casualty must wait outside. The next step is triage. A doctor assesses and assigns a colour to each patient. This decision has to be taken quickly using several simple criteria. If the patient can walk and has no worrying injuries or symptoms, it's a green case, the least urgent, and treatment can wait a few hours. If the patient is lying down and not breathing, or if the doctor judges that the hospital does not have the necessary resources to save their life, it's a black case, by far the hardest decision to take, and the patient receives palliative care. If the patient has worrying injuries or symptoms, or is showing signs of neurological, respiratory, or cardiovascular distress, this is a red case, necessitating priority treatment. All other cases are dispatched to the yellow zone, where they can wait an hour for treatment. Hospital porters carry the patients to their designated zones. In the red zone, emergency room doctors stabilise the patients, and the surgeon decides who requires surgery and in which order. This system enables the saving of the greatest possible number of lives. After attacks in Pakistan and in Yemen, for example, MSF teams have had to treat hundreds of casualties in the space of just a few days.
J'ai toujours été sur le terrain à l'étranger et après 8 ans à l'étranger, je reviens un peu en France et je découvre une situation absolument incroyable par rapport à cette problématique des migrants. Ça me choque assez, aussi bien au niveau de notre gouvernement, de nos instances, la manière dont on accueille ces migrants. Donc je suis vraiment assez outrée par les procédés et en même temps plutôt quand même rassurée de voir que les citoyens sont très impliqués, en tout cas sur Paris. Heureusement que les citoyens sont là, très clairement, parce qu'ils ont comblé le gap de notre État, quelque part, en intervenant auprès de ces migrants qui dorment dehors. Ravi d'autre part aussi qu'MSF soit impliqué sur la gestion des migrants à Paris. Tout le monde semble enfin unanime sur le fait qu'on doit continuer à faire quelque chose. Donc ça c'est vraiment super et avec du recul, je vous avoue que je ne comprends pas pourquoi MSF n'était pas encore là, quoi.